September 1944. The Allied advance across France is moving faster than anyone predicted. German forces are reeling. Paris has been liberated. Supply depots are being overrun before they can be destroyed. Columns of American armor stretch for miles across the countryside, and at the center of it all stands one man, General George S. Patton. To some, he is the sharp edge of Allied momentum. To others, he is a political liability waiting to detonate, because the question now confronting Allied leadership is no longer whether Patton can win battles. It is whether he can be controlled. Patton's Third Army had exploded out of Normandy. In August, during Operation Cobra, once the German line cracked near Saint-Lay, he did not advance cautiously. He accelerated. His armored divisions swung south, then east, cutting off retreating German formations. Entire enemy corps dissolved under relentless pressure. The encirclement at Falaise tightened in part because Patton's forces moved faster than German planners believed possible. 2 frontline soldiers. He represented momentum. He visited forward positions constantly. He demanded speed. He rewarded initiative. Officers who hesitated were removed. Units that stalled were pushed harder. But that same aggression made political leadership uneasy. Only months earlier, Patton had been sidelined after the infamous Sicily slapping incidents in 1943. He had struck hospitalized soldiers suffering from battle fatigue, calling them cowards. The public backlash had been severe. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of Allied Expeditionary Force, had been forced to reprimand him formally. Patton apologized, publicly. Privately, many senior officers wondered whether he had changed at all. Now, in the autumn of 1944, his battlefield success was undeniable, yet his reputation followed him like a shadow. He spoke bluntly, often recklessly. He made offhand remarks about post-war politics in the Soviet Union that made diplomats nervous. He believed in destroying the German army completely and moving, without hesitation, toward Berlin. But Allied strategy was not purely military. The Western Allies were coordinating with the Soviet Union. Political considerations shaped operational boundaries. Eisenhower's broad front strategy aimed to advance on multiple axes, maintaining unity between British and American forces. Patton had little patience for broad fronts. He preferred decisive thrusts, inside safe headquarters. Concerns were raised quietly but persistently. Could Patton's relentless push strain already fragile supply lines? Could his public comments inflame diplomatic tensions with Moscow? Could his disregard for caution create a political crisis at the worst possible moment? At the same time, removing or restraining him risked slowing the Allied advance, and speed, in September 1944, felt like victory itself. On the battlefield, Patton's methods were consistent. He believed in striking continuously. He insisted that German forces must never be allowed time to reorganize. When resistance stiffened, he ordered flanking maneuvers rather than prolonged frontal assaults. This approach delivered results, but it also generated chaos behind the lines. Fuel consumption soared. Third Army's supply officers struggled too. Keep up. The famous Red Bull Express truck convoys ran day and night, hauling gasoline and ammunition from Normandy beaches to forward units. Even so, Patton routinely outran his logistics. In staff meetings, quartermasters warned that rapid advances without secured supply corridors could leave spearheads vulnerable. Patton's response was simple. Speed reduces vulnerability to him. Hesitation was the greater risk. Eisenhower understood the logic, but as Supreme Commander, he also understood coalition politics. British commanders, particularly Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, advocated more concentrated offensives under tighter coordination. Patton's independence complicated that balance. More than once, restraint orders were issued. Advance only as fuel allows. Do not overextend beyond supply capacity. Coordinate closely with neighboring armies. Avoid unilateral thrusts that disrupt overall planning. On paper, these were reasonable directives. In practice, they felt to Patton like shackles. He complied, formally, yet he constantly searched for openings within those constraints. If fuel allocations were limited, he concentrated it on a single armored thrust, rather than spreading it evenly. If boundaries were drawn between armies, he probed at their edges. He believed war rewarded audacity, but audacity, at his level of command, carried consequences beyond the battlefield. The tension reached a new level as Allied forces approached the German border. In late September 1944, Patton pushed toward Metz and the Saar region. The terrain was far less forgiving than open French countryside. Rivers, fortified lines, and autumn rain slowed movement. For the first time since the breakout, momentum faltered. German defenses stiffened. The Siegfried Line loomed ahead. Inside Allied headquarters, some quietly questioned whether Patton's rapid dash had reached its limit. Was his method sustainable against prepared fortifications? Had speed masked deeper logistical weaknesses? At the same time, Patton began pressing for bold alternatives. He proposed deep penetrations into Germany before winter could solidify defenses. He argued that the German army was disorganized and that hesitation would allow it to recover. Eisenhower hesitated. The Allied coalition was preparing Operation Market Garden under Montgomery in the north. Resources were finite. Fuel allocations could not satisfy every ambition. Simultaneously, choosing one axis meant denying another. Patton was both an asset and a complication in that calculation. His successes proved the effectiveness of aggressive maneuver, his unpredictability, complicated, unified strategy. And then there were the words, Patton's off-the-record remarks about the Soviet Union suggesting future confrontation was inevitably circulated among senior officers. Though not publicly broadcast, they deepened unease. Allied unity was fragile enough without inflammatory rhetoric from one of its most visible generals. Diplomacy required discipline. Patton valued candor over diplomacy. In October 1944, as Third Army fought bitter engagements around Metz, the cost of aggression became visible. German fortifications, artillery, and flooded terrain slowed. Armored thrusts, casualties, mounted. Progress, measured in miles per day, now shrank to yards. Patton adapted tactically, but his reputation did not soften. Critics, inside the political sphere, saw confirmation of their concerns. They argued that his dash across France had depended on collapsing German resistance against prepared defenses. Raw speed alone could not guarantee success. Supporters countered that no other American commander had demonstrated comparable operational mobility. They argued that if Germany was to be defeated decisively, leaders like Patton were indispensable. The debate remained mostly behind closed doors. To the average soldier in Third Army, the issue was simpler. Patton was visible. He appeared at muddy crossroads in polished boots and helmet. He urged speed, even in rain. He spoke of destiny, of crushing the enemy before winter. His presence reassured some and pressured others. He demanded relentless forward motion. Yet above him, caution was tightening. Orders to conserve fuel, orders to stabilize lines, orders to coordinate more closely with adjacent formations. Patton followed them just enough. The duality defined him. He was the commander who could shatter German defenses through tempo and aggression. He was also the general whose personality could strain alliance cohesion. As autumn deepened, the war entered a new phase. Germany was wounded but not broken. The Western Front stretched long and vulnerable. Supplies were strained. Weather was deteriorating. And within Allied high command, a quiet question lingered. Could they afford to unleash Patton completely? Or could they afford not to? Because if the German army found space to recover, if winter slowed the advance, if diplomatic tensions fractured unity, the cost would not be theoretical. It would be measured in months of additional war, measured in lives. For now, Patton remained in command of Third Army, advancing, arguing, testing limits, an asset, a liability, a problem named Patton. August 1944. France is breaking open. German Seventh Army is collapsing under pressure. Communications are failing. Entire formations are withdrawing in disorder. And in the center of the chaos, one American army keeps moving faster than the map can adjust. Third Army under General George S. Patton is no longer simply advancing. It is breaking through, again and again. The first shock comes after Operation Cobra tears open the Normandy front near Once the German line fractures, Patton does not pause to consolidate. He pivots south and then east, sending armored columns racing through Brittany and toward the Loire. His intent is clear. Do not allow the enemy to reform. Where other commanders might have paused to secure flanks, Patton accepts calculated risk. He pushes forward elements beyond traditional safety margins. Recon units move ahead of infantry support. Armor drives deep into rear areas before resistance can solidify. The result is operational paralysis on the German side. At every branches, American forces seize the critical road junction that acts as the hinge of the breakout. German commanders attempt to launch a counterattack at Mortain to cut the corridor. Patton responds, not defensively, but aggressively. He redirects armored divisions to widen the gap rather than merely protect it. The counterattack collapses. By mid-August, the Falaise pocket is forming. Canadian and British forces press from the north. Patton's Third Army swings from the south. The encirclement tightens around German Army Group B. Entire divisions are trapped. Though thousands escape before the pocket fully closes, vast quantities of equipment are destroyed. Vehicles burn across Norman fields. German cohesion disintegrates under relentless pressure. Frontline reports begin repeating the same assessment. Speed is decisive, not overwhelming numbers, not superior firepower alone. Tempo. Patton's Corps commanders adopt the same rhythm. The 12th Corps and the 20th Corps are ordered to exploit every breakthrough without waiting for full consolidation. Bridges are seized intact whenever possible. Engineers follow closely behind, reinforcing crossings as armor continues forward. When fuel shortages threaten momentum, Patton makes ruthless prioritizations. He halts less critical sectors and concentrates gasoline on spearheads. One division moves while another waits. It is a gamble, but it keeps the offensive alive. In late August, Third Army advances hundreds of miles in a matter of weeks. Town after town falls with minimal resistance because German units cannot establish stable defensive lines. They retreat faster than they can coordinate. By early September, American armored elements are approaching the German frontier. The pattern has become unmistakable. Breakthrough, exploitation, encirclement, collapse. And yet, not every Allied formation achieves the same results. North of Patton's sector, British and Canadian forces face heavier resistance in the Channel ports and along prepared defensive positions. Progress is steady, but measured. Montgomery's strategy emphasizes concentration and deliberate assault. In contrast, Patton's sector resembles fluid maneuver warfare reminiscent of early German blitzkrieg campaigns. Some Allied officers quietly study his methods. Rapid decision cycles, delegated authority to corps and division. Commanders. Constant forward pressure, clear, simple orders: attack, exploit, do not stop. Other formations attempt to replicate the tempo, but speed is not simply an instruction. It requires alignment of logistics, command, confidence, and risk tolerance. Patton accepts uncertainty as a cost of momentum. Not every commander does. As Third Army pushes toward the Moselle River, German resistance stiffens. The terrain changes. Rivers create natural defensive barriers. Fortified cities like Metz stand directly in the path of advance. The question emerges, can breakthrough continue under these conditions? Patton answers with another calculated push. In early September 1944, elements of the 20th Corps attempt to cross the Moselle under heavy artillery fire. German units defend strongly from fortified positions originally constructed before the war. Casualties rise. Progress slows. For the first time since Normandy, momentum falters. Critics within Allied command take notice. They argue that speed alone cannot overcome prepared fortifications. They suggest consolidation before deeper penetration into Germany, but Patton refuses to abandon pressure. He adjusts tactics. Instead of direct assaults on every fortress, he probes for weak crossings. He shifts axes unexpectedly. He uses diversionary attacks to draw German reserves away from true crossing points, and eventually, the line bends. Though progress is slower than the dash across France, breakthroughs still occur. Once a bridgehead is secured, armored units surge through before German artillery can concentrate effectively. Again, exploitation follows penetration. Again, the front shifts. By October, Third Army has forced crossings over the Moselle and established footholds in Lorraine. The advance is no longer measured in hundreds of miles, but the pattern remains consistent. Find a seam, widen it, push relentlessly. Frontline reports increasingly attribute success not merely to American material superiority, but to operational tempo. German defenders frequently report being struck before positions are fully organized. Counterattacks are launched too late. Reserves arrive after the decisive point has already shifted.